Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. This is your boy, the Diggity Dog, Mr. Peptide Panther, here with the Wobbly Wildcard to chat through a bunch of Kiwi sporting matters and or Kiwi sporting excellence, as we like to do most episodes on the Niche Cast. We have just recorded the little warm-up chat for our Patreons where the Wildcard ran through what is happening over in England with the Premier League football. Everything is all over the place there, so the Wildcard broke that down. Sign up to our Patreon. That is the best way to support us if you appreciate the content we're delivering. And we do special bits of content for our patrons as well, so it's a nice little place to be. Every Monday and Friday we deliver an email with some more Kiwi sporting updates and ideas, and then of course we're always writing about sport on the website Wildcard. It is coming up to the end of the month and I have two questions for you. How the fuck are you going? And what's an album that has been resonating with you over the course of the month as we prepare to do our monthly album jukebox?
Question A, doing bloody well. Question 2, I would say, I don't know. Over the course of this week, it would be the new Garcia People's album called Nightcap at Wit's End, which is a little bit of a proggier direction for them. Sounds like a bit of a few like King Crimson kind of reminiscences there on the first couple tracks in particular. Next week it will be the new Fuzz album, Fuzz 3, which I haven't heard in its entirety yet, but I already know that I'm going to love it because it's Fuzz. And over the course of the full month, I would say that my most listened to album would be the new Sturgill Simpson one, which is called, I had it written down here, Cutting Grass, Volume 1, The Butcher Shop Sessions, which is a thing where he was like, while he was stuck on lockdown back home, and I think he's from Kentucky, and he had himself a little bout of the old Rona, and he pretty much just like said to his, like, the fans on the gram, he's just like, if you fellas, raise enough money for these charities that I happen to support. There was like a musician thing. There was a ex-army, like a veterans charity, something else as well. I don't know. I think it might have been Black Lives Matter actually. So like a trio of things. Like, you fellas raise enough money for us and for these causes, and I'm just gonna, since I'm stuck in town at the moment, just gonna go into the studio and like redo a bunch of all my old songs, but done in like a bluegrass fashion. So like mandolins and bloody fiddles and stuff like that, and shuffling drum beats and whatever, and that happened. Like, and more than enough money was raised. He went in with just like, because everyone's stuck at home and like no one's touring, he just basically picked like the best of the best bluegrass musicians in Nashville at the time, and it's like, well, let's do this then. And so they cut like 40 tracks, and this is volume 1 with about 20 of them. Basically a mixtape. Like, the track list is all the songs just in the same, just in like alphabetical order, and it's so good, man. Like, if like the bluegrass sound isn't your thing, you probably wouldn't fall for it, but if it is, then it's like, it's just outstanding. Like, he's never sung better than that. His songs without like the adornments just stand even like stronger, and it's just a bloody good album full of very good songs. And that one is the one that, for whatever reason, I think also it's a very summery album, and it's starting to get towards those months now. So there, therefore the vibe just worked. That's clearly what I've been listening to the most over the course of this month, I believe. What about yourself?
Summer's come pretty early if we're doing a bit of weather chat. I mean, it's mid-October and it's fucking pretty sunny every day and pretty hot every day, so definitely a good time to get a bit of old Sturgill pumping. I'm just always fascinated by what Griselda Records are doing. Everyone who listens or reads the monthly jukebox, there's always something from Griselda Records worth mentioning. And this month, both Benny the Butcher and West Side Gun released albums that are very, very different to each other. And there's a bit of a change in sound happening, because I remember, I think maybe last month I was listening to Conway the Machine, his album, and it was a very expansive sound. And for those who are familiar with Griselda, you would know that there's a very distinct underground, hip-hop, gritty, grimy sound that they came up with. But now they're kind of graduating to a more, like all-encompassing hip-hop sound. Like they're like leveling up to a different stratosphere, and Benny the Butcher's album follows suit. But what they're doing is they're maintaining who they are, their style of music, their brand, while leveling up, which is rather amazing when you consider any artist, whether it's hip-hop, whether it's rock, or bloody dubstep, whatever musical genre it is, there's a point where the level up happens, but the sound completely gets washed away because you're leveling up to a more pop sound or a more digestible sound on all levels. Whereas what Griselda are doing is they're leveling up, they're welcoming in other producers to provide a lot of the music, but their integrity and their brand is still intact. So that's been a big thing from this month, and talking about Conway the Machine going back to last month, but also locally in Auckland, we've had Church and AP released I think it's a 5-track project, which is really good. Really good. Like their sound is like it's a hip hop style, but it's you can tell that they were raised as part of the younger generation with just a lot of the influences. Like you can like think about it like earlier Kanye West, a bit of like Pharrell, that kind of style where just musically it's a bit all over the show, and then more modern influences might be like a Slow Tie or just stuff like that where it's very upbeat, a lot of different sounds, but it's also rooted in hip-hop. And yeah, I really enjoyed listening to Church and AP's latest offering. And there's also a 3-song project released by Swit It as well, which I haven't listened to yet, but I'm going to. And that's, coming off the back where we've had Diggy Dupe release a really good album, and then we've got little projects from Swit It, little project from Church and AP. It's pretty exciting. So you've got like internationally, Griselda Records is kind of dominating everything, along with, the likes of The Alchemist and those type of artists that I talk about a lot. But locally, a lot of really cool things happening locally. Like you've talked about Troy Kingy, and we had that really good Diggy Dupe album. Now we got Church and AP. Now we got Swit It doing music stuff as well. So it's all rather cool on the music front. And I look forward to, over the next few days, listening to the Swit It project and then trying to write about what I'm hearing with Church and AP and Swit It.
Yeah, thought on Griselda Records there, because I haven't listened to nearly as much as yourself, but I would be an ostrich with my head in the sand if I hadn't noticed the very prominent rise of Griselda over the last 2-3 years probably. And they're from, am I right here? They're from Buffalo, eh?
Yes, they are from Buffalo.
And is that like a scene that has had a major kind of obviously there's scenes all over, because this is what it's sort of got me thinking about, is you don't necessarily hear Buffalo hip hop that much. It's dominated by New York City, which is obviously not very far away from Buffalo. I think same state. Shout out to the Buffalo Bills, who are the only good team in New York in the NFL this season. But you tend to get you hear about it's New York is in Brooklyn area, and it's LA is in Compton, and you get these kind of hotspots, I suppose, but then those hotspots like dominate the last 30 years of hip hop. And obviously you've got like the last, I was gonna say the last decade, but then that would be extremely rude to like let's just say over that same time you've had like big hotspots in Atlanta and Detroit and places like that. But it just seems like even then, like, you're dominating on big areas. And then we're just talking about how there's like 3-4 really excellent like Kiwi hip hop projects over the last month or two. It's just, I don't know if there's even a question in this, but it just sort of got me thinking about how much a lot of that kind of stuff is just like marketing, like being able to say you're from LA or whatever, and then you can play in the East Coast, West Coast, you sort of cling on to the other scene, and it's a bit of a like, I don't know, it's a bit of a, hopefully something that you understand why that happens, but at the same time something that hopefully is maybe being dismantled a little bit more, where you can just be like top tier wherever you're from, because ultimately, like, if you've got the internet, there's not really geographical reasons for those. You don't have to like move to the big city to find that kind of audience. You can find that audience from your home studio in the garage or whatever. Like, I don't know, it just sort of got me thinking about but at the same time, I guess there's something very like pure and inspiring about when you can get like a tethered kind of community scene going. So I don't know, it's maybe an ongoing thought that I'll have to keep pondering for a while to get my head around.
Well, it kind of, yeah, as you said, it doesn't matter because of the internet. So the hotspots aren't as relevant now. However, what Griselda's doing, like, it's, I think a lot of it is culture. So it just depends on, each of these cities is going to have, fortunately or unfortunately, is going to have pockets of hip-hop culture, which obviously is rooted in African American culture and the everyday lives of those people. So those pockets are everywhere. So you're going to have, like, every city has that. So there's a quote-unquote scene in every city, and it doesn't really matter where you're from because of the internet. But what Griselda's done is they're from Buffalo. So obviously no one thinks about Buffalo when you're thinking about hip-hop, because if you're in the local area, you're so close to New York that you just worry about New York hip-hop. And them being from Buffalo has been a huge factor in their rise. Like, they're big on, before them, no one got signed from Buffalo, and Buffalo's a bit of a nothing city. Like, nothing's really happening there other than just like tough existence. But Griselda, they're street dudes as well. They're hustlers. They've been in and out of prison. But what my key takeaway in observing it is their authenticity to who they are and their brand. They are very creative, very artistic, it goes back to like the avant-garde style. And they didn't like sacrifice any of that for just quick radio plays or quick exposure. Like, they had a plan, they stuck to their plan, they came together, they each have their own style, they each have their way of operating, and they signed a deal to Shady Records, but even in that, all the business stuff is in alignment with who they are, so they're not like sacrificing all their hard work just to sign with a major label. It was a very slow process. They built it up. They're huge into fashion. They're huge into art. They're huge into, finer hip hop as well as that gritty sound. So I think what I'm getting to is that in a world where it doesn't matter where you're from, in a world where you've got the internet to kind of bypass the local scene, because without the internet you've got to hustle to get your music on the local radio station. You've got to get a song that is hot locally, and then you build it up and hopefully get some exposure from there. Without the internet, you can kind of bypass that local stage, and you've just got to have a hot song on the internet, and it doesn't matter where you're from. But Griselda, invested time and money and resource and effort into establishing themselves as a local underground Buffalo hardcore group of artists, and their work was at such a high level and their integrity was at such a high level that everyone just kind of, over the last 5 years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, every day there's just been a level, like new people finding out about their music, and that just builds up until it's kind of undeniable. And they're coming out with like a certain, like their sound is completely different to the trends of hip hop internationally. And again, going back to like because of their integrity, it's very easy to buy into what they're doing. Because of their extensive back catalog, it's easy to buy into what they're doing. They're constantly releasing new music as well, which is a chance to get new people involved. And then they go back and listen to the old music. So I think it's just being the best. Like, if you're the best, it doesn't matter where you're from. And you're going to rise up, and you're going to, especially if you go about your business in a certain way. Like, if you sell yourself out just to have a hot song, doesn't really matter how good you are. There's nothing for people to hold on to. There's no back catalog. There's no brand. There's no identity for people to attach themselves to. But if you take your time, do it properly, as Griselda have done, with high quality music, that's when you get the attachment and the appreciation. And also just thinking about their sound and what I'm listening to with Diggy Dupe and Switter and Church and AP and other artists here in New Zealand, all of that is completely separate to the main trends in hip-hop now. Because you've got there's kind of the SoundCloud generation stuff, the and the same style of beat, the same sound, the same delivery. All of that stuff is very prominent in the hip hop music you hear today, to the point where like it's not really like hip hop, it's just pop music. Hip hop is pop music now. That is for sure. That's why rock has diminished, because instead of pop rock, that whole subgenre has been replaced with pop music rooted in hip hop and R&B. And then you've got there's a big New York drill sound. There's a big London drill sound. And that drill culture is now in Australia. So a lot of the music we're hearing out of Australia now, the hip hop music, is Australian drill hip hop. But what I'm hearing from these New Zealand artists is a completely different sound. And that's something that I think is worth writing about, because it's not just like Diggy Dupe, Switter, Church and AP. It's not just like they are, emulating a Griselda sound or a Kendrick Lamar sound. So they're not even following the trend, and they're not even following the underground, authentic, high-quality music trend either. These artists from New Zealand are making their own music with what I consider to be like a New Zealand sound. That is the best thing. They're not following what is happening around the world necessarily. Like, they bring in influences, but they're putting it with their own cultural twist in it, because a lot of these dudes are Māori, Polynesian. They've grown up in New Zealand, and they've been exposed to a lot of New Zealand music. They've been exposed to a lot of, all the international music as well. So there's so many little cultural bits that they can bring in to form who they are as a person, as an artist. And that's when you get the real unique Kiwi music, because you have a unique sound, a unique perspective. Like, they are always they're far more likely to use Kiwi slang, Kiwi references in their music than adopt foreign slang and foreign references, which is beautiful. And to me, it's just following on. We're following on from Fat Freddy's Drop, Cora, Shapeshifter, those type of that quintessential Kiwi sound is present and evident in this type of Kiwi hip-hop as well. And that's, for someone like me who definitely bypasses those generic copy-paste kind of styles of music, it's amazing. Like, we talk about New Zealand being the best sports nation in the world, and we also have our own artists, our own musical artists who are delivering super high-quality music, but in a Kiwi way. And that is quite unique as well.
Yeah, that's sort of, I guess, summing up what I was thinking about it with the initial idea is like, if we can have a scene in New Zealand like that, there should be scenes like that all over the world. And it's like, why do some become popular and well known beyond their own cities, and why do some not? And like, I guess a lot of that is just marketing. I don't know, whatever sells can be sold, and then that becomes influential. I don't know. It's a bit of a deeper well to dive into on that front. But I watched a real good movie over the weekend on Netflix called The Trial of the Chicago 7, and Sacha Baron Cohen was in it, actually. Big week for him between that and Borat 2, which Borat 2 is amazing, by the way. I might write about that once I've watched it again to get my head around a couple ideas I had as some more. But in this movie, like, it's based on a true story set in the sort of late 60s, early 70s. It's about a trial for a bunch of anti-Vietnam War activists where they, like, protested on the streets, and then the police came in and it became, like, got agitated and there was violence that happened, and bunch of, like, it's not like a couple of them were, hippies, a couple students, a couple, like, there was a Black Panther dude who was brought up in amongst it all, like, sort of conflagration of all these groups, sort of anti-establishment type groups at the time, and it's just it was a really good movie, but it also, like, just straight watching, like, Sacha Baron Cohen as Abby Hoffman walking down the street there leading a protest is just like, I wish I was there. Like, how cool would that be? And this sort of gets into that kind of it gets into that idea of, like, one of those things that I think about sometimes, like when I read Jack Kerouac or something. I read a Kerouac book the other week, and it was like he always writes about that kind of beatnik scene and whatever, and it's like I want one of those scenes. Like, I want to hang out with just a bunch of like intelligent, creative people, like a community of it like that. Like I think that's what all sort of people with, creative aspirations want, is to be around other people like them who challenge them and give them new ideas and inspiration and stuff like that. It just seems like the most healthy environment for creativity is to be around more creativity and better, more inspirational creativity too. But then, like, thinking about the, like, what would it take for me to have been there? I would have had to been born and, like, to be of a certain age in 1968 to be able to walk. Obviously, there's a there's a timeline problem there. But then, even if it was, like, if this was happening right now, I also wouldn't have been there because I wouldn't have been in Chicago at that time. Like, there's also that strict, like, you sort of had to be there. Like, you had to be of a certain, like, it's not like that kind of scene was just open to anybody. Which was a bit of a downbuzz thinking about it. Like, I couldn't just go out and recreate that myself because it's not possible. Like, that's just was not for me, as much as it would have looked very cool to be in a movie like that. But I guess that's probably the point, is it's not so much that you want to be, like, emulating the things that have already happened in those kind of communities. You want to be starting your own. Like, you want to be sparking up your own thing and taking a deeper inspiration rather than, like, I mean, you've already given the perfect example of what I'm trying to say here, of instead of just, like, Kiwi hip hop, but singing in just, taking the trends from America or the UK or whatever, not just doing that, but, like, doing your own thing, and the inspiration you take from is from people who are also doing that, who, like, Griselda, for example, showing you that it can be done. You can start up your whole scene from scratch. You can do it the right way. You can do things properly. And I'll tell you what, like, this might be a nice little transition for us, but all the things you're saying about, like, the integrity of, what they're doing with Griselda Records, like, the integrity of that, not selling out, being different as well, like swimming against the tide a little bit and finding success through it. And then not just success, but influence. Like, I gotta be honest, a lot of those things you were saying sounded, and also, most importantly, probably doing it different, like, apart from the traditional sort of, like, geographic centers. A lot of that sounded very reminiscent of the city kickboxing story.
Yes, you surprised me with I thought you were going to bring up the Melbourne Storm there, and that was going to be the nice segue, but you just surprised me. I had to have a little think about city kickboxing. Yeah, yeah, that's a fairly easy one. Like, maybe it's just a thing with New Zealand, like, where we're quite far removed from a lot of because we're influenced by a lot of stuff, but we're not. You know, it's I don't know. I can't really speak on it right now. I have to, like, think about that one a bit more in depth, but definitely city kickboxing.
It's sort of like we have to do it ourselves, you know? Whereas in America, you can just get on a bus and go to LA or New York City or whatever. In New Zealand, you can't. Because we're isolated, we're sort of pushed into that DIY kind of attitude, I suppose.
Yes, and as a segue to the Melbourne Storm and a couple of those topics, I think it's just it just goes back to us and who we are. Like, yeah, you can try and figure out, like, why are we the way we are, and that goes back to what you're saying, like, we are forced to do it our way, but it's also our way is team first. Our way is fitting into a team culture. Our way in New Zealand is doing your job for the greater good. Our way is also your team is your family. And you hear a lot about, like, other teams around the world and be like, oh, this team's like my family, like, the boys have been through so much and stuff like that, which definitely applies. But any team you're involved in New Zealand, there is an effort to build that family environment in the team. And that's what has happened with the All Blacks. That's what happens in every team that you're seeing. That's what happens at City Kickboxing, because I was listening to an interview with Eugene Behrman on Combat TV, and Carlos Ulberg. So when the City Kickboxing boys, they had all their fights over in UAE, Carlos Ulberg and Mike Blood Diamond also traveled over as, like, just to, they're both close to being in the UFC, kickboxers, train with City Kickboxing. They've been training partners for all the UFC fighters at City Kickboxing, and there's a couple of moves that are happening there. Carlos Ulberg has picked up a gig for the Contender Series, I think it is, which is like a way to bring in fighters into the UFC from around the world. But what's happening, he has to go over to Las Vegas, and Eugene Behrman has to, like, he's dedicating himself to Junior Fa, and because he's been away, like, he's had to do 2 different quarantines coming back into New Zealand. He's been traveling around the world in 2020, which is an absolute nightmare. And he promised, like, Doug Viney, who's the main boxing coach there, and Junior Fa, that he's not going anywhere. He's going to dedicate these last few months to training Junior Fa for that Joseph Parker fight. So Carlos Ulberg, he has to go over to America to fight in that Contender Series, I think. And with him is Israel Adesanya and Brad Riddell. And that is just, like, normal for us, because, like, no matter who Israel Adesanya is, internationally as a superstar, whatever, he is rooted in the team, in the whānau of City Kickboxing. And it's how they operate. Like, Carlos Ulberg has pretty much been Israel Adesanya's sparring partner, training partner throughout the UFC period of Adesanya's career. So, based on the City Kickboxing culture, on the Kiwi culture as well, the Kiwi sporting culture, it's only right for Israel Adesanya to travel with Carlos Ulberg and be there for Carlos Ulberg. And it's also right for Eugene Behrman to, in some ways it's a sacrifice, but it's also an opportunity for Brad Riddell. Like, it's an opportunity for Eugene Behrman to say, Brad Riddell, Israel Adesanya, you guys are the leaders of the fight team. Here's an opportunity for you to corner like one of your boys. That's a cool opportunity, but it's also Eugene Behrman sacrificing what he does best to help prepare Junior Fa. All of that is very, 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 very Kiwi. And it's all been like super present in my mind because I've thought about this a lot with the All Blacks, and today I wrote about the Melbourne Storm. Like, we can talk about the grand final if you want, like little moments in the grand final, but I've also talked about the players a lot, and I don't really have anything to add like from that grand final other than Nelson Asafa-Solomona diving everywhere to tackle blokes around the legs, which is absolutely crazy when you're 2 meters tall and 120 kgs, whatever he is. Like, he defends like he's a halfback. Like, he just chops blokes down. It's amazing. But what I was realizing this morning, as I wrote about the Monday morning dummy half and doing some research, is there's a massive All Blacks influence at the Melbourne Storm. So the easy thing there is that Andrew Blowers is a player welfare coordinator at the Melbourne Storm. Andrew Blowers, former All Black. I think he came up with Auckland, and he's been around the rugby world for ages. He's had that gig for a couple of years. There has also been Richie McCaw has gone over for like jersey presentations and stuff like that. And Wayne Smith, former All Blacks coach, he has worked in a official and a non-official capacity as like an advisor, within the last 5 years. But all of that is possible because the Melbourne Storm, he might be the majority owner. He's one of the owners. His name is Bart Campbell. And Bart Campbell is from New Zealand. And prior to his role with the Storm, he was the chairman, but I think he stood down as the chairman earlier this year. He was the manager of Richie McCaw. He was the manager of Dan Carter. I think another client he had was Ian Botham. And then he's with the Storm, and right now he is the co-owner of the Storm, and he is also on the New Zealand Rugby Strategy Board, and he's also on the World Rugby Executive Committee. So when you think back through those players I mentioned, well, Richie McCaw, he used to work with Bart Campbell. So it's an obvious, easy connection. Wayne Smith not only, because like the Storm, so Wayne Smith, he was connected to the Melbourne Storm because he's apparently best friends with Bart Campbell. So there's a lot of information sharing between the Melbourne Storm and the All Blacks, let alone just like having someone like Andrew Blowers there as part of the fabric of the organization to help just, be present. Like, he does a lot of like great things with the Polynesian players, Māori players, cultural stuff. And going back to the family ethos of Kiwi sports teams, that's the biggest thing about the Melbourne Storm, is that like they were singing the Fijian hymn. I think it was at like 1 a.m. of the night of their game. They went out and sung the hymn for Suliasi Vunivalu, who was leaving to play Super Rugby. Like, it's that knowledge of your teammates' culture and your teammates sharing their culture, sharing who they are, sharing their family. That's what brings everyone together to be one big family, and that's where you reap the rewards as a sports team. Not to mention little notes like Nelson Asafa-Solomona and Vunivalu, they were playing first 15 rugby in 2013. They're both in the same under-20s Melbourne Storm team in 2014. But it's all very interesting, but I just found those like more behind the scenes connections, and it's really no surprise that if there is one sports team in the whole wide world that resembles the All Blacks the most, it is the Melbourne Storm. Why is that the case? Because they share information with the All Blacks. The All Blacks share information with the Melbourne Storm, and they have like willingly collaborated to ensure that each club, each team performs for at a high level consistently over a long period of time. And the last thing I'd say along those lines is it might have been this Bart Campbell fella who instigated this idea. But we've talked about like the Penrith Panthers might have a slight advantage this season because of their travel schedule. Like they don't really have to travel. Like the Eels had a lot of home games, whereas compared to Canberra Raiders, they had to travel for every damn game. Like it was a bit of like each team had a different logistical situation. The Melbourne Storm had to uproot themselves and go to the Sunshine Coast, which is less than ideal, but it's also ideal because like the Warriors, there were benefits of them spending time together as a unit. Like it's kind of like a rugby league fantasy. Like you just go, you train, you enjoy your time with your teammates, you play, and you repeat that. But the Melbourne Storm, it was kind of like beneficial to them tenfold because they were able to get their families there. They were able to like build this whole like just situation on the Sunshine Coast that Melbourne Storm are always good, but I think being on the Sunshine Coast was an extra boost to them because you're taking like an already family orientated club and you're putting them all in the same place together for 3-4 months, and it's like you're just amplifying that family first ethos. But back in 2015, the Melbourne Storm went out of their way to establish an academy on the Sunshine Coast. So it's not just like, it's very different from the Warriors situation because the Warriors had to find somewhere to base themselves. Melbourne Storm, back in 2015, decided to set up an academy on the Sunshine Coast. That's where one of their reserve grade teams is. They brought in a netball team that Laura Langman played for, and I believe Laura Langman and Nolene Totoa won back-to-back Super Netball Championships in 2016 and 17, or their first 2 years of playing as a team. So the Melbourne Storm enjoyed the benefits of being able to move to the Sunshine Coast, but that's only because they stepped outside the box and decided to set up a base at the Sunshine Coast back in 2015-16. So it's all very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense how these decisions, like how the Storm are in this position right now, when you go back and you look at their connection to the All Blacks and the decisions they have made for the club and also just recruitment decisions and stuff like that. It's really, really interesting, I think.
Yeah, fascinating. Like, there's actually a real parallel between what we were talking about before and what you're just saying there, I think, as well. Like, that idea about New Zealand's relative isolation from a lot of the rest of the world being turned into, like, a catalyst for innovation and creativity and things like that. You know, the Melbourne Storm play out of Victoria, obviously not this year, but most years, every other year. It's like that. That's not, Victoria's not where you go if you want to like find top tier rugby league ordinarily. Like the hubs are obviously New South Wales and Queensland. For that reason, the Melbourne Storm were sort of pushed into having to be a little bit more innovative and outside the box when it comes to I mean, player recruitment in particular, like you were saying about the Sunshine Coast thing, sort of started from having set up a little player, what do you call it, like development type, like that comes down into the whole player recruitment thing, the leadership group of the team that they've had for so long, which is currently like obviously helmed by Mr. Cameron Smith. Like when you had Smith, Cronk, and Slater, all like Queenslanders who had been recruited at a young age, and like a lot of it seems to probably stem from that kind of like if you're that obviously they were forced to go looking out of the box for players, and then when your mind is already open to thinking creatively about the club in one aspect, then it's not too hard to start thinking creatively in other aspects, coaching, tactical, how like what the talent you've got in the boardroom, even like and all aspects of like cultural as well. Like I think all of these things are, it's not like one leads to the other, it's all a big holistic kind of like if your mind is open, then it's open. You know, you don't just get the ideas, you're opening it too. You open yourself up to a little bit of everything, and the Melbourne Storm just seem to be a club that functions on all levels like that, and it probably has a lot to do, like, what should be their biggest weakness, which is the fact that they're not from a part of the country where rugby league dominates, and the fact that, like, that, I mean, they're just sort of isolated in general, a lot more travel, a lot more, you know, harder to build up a fan base, but then these things have been turned from weaknesses into their biggest strength in a way. And obviously it's not universal, or else the New Zealand Warriors would have won a few titles by now. But I mean, it just goes to show it can be done if you get everything operating on a high level. And it's, I mean, the Melbourne Storm are just a bloody, like, they're, as far as Australasian sports go, they're probably like the go-to example. Like that's what you want to, I mean, the All Blacks as well, sure, but they're an international team, so it's a little bit different. They don't have to develop their players themselves. What the Melbourne Storm do is just like, in any sport, you want to be like, just picking brains and just reading all the articles you can and talking to all the people you can, because they're just like operating in such a high level. It's honestly like, because it's one of the things we talk about a lot, is how do you, like, success in sport is the ultimate aim, but how do you get to that point? What defines success? And like, these are the kind of things that the Storm just seem to know and have figured out. And it's, yeah, honestly, man, like it's fascinating to think about, and it's fascinating to talk about, just like when things are, when I was going to say a well-oiled machine, but I'd prefer a more organic example. I don't know what that would be, but a well-tended garden, I don't know, but that's the Melbourne Storm.
It definitely is the Melbourne Storm, and there was a lot of noise, like Penrith Panthers, a lot of their players, like there was a lot of noise about them coming up through the grades together as like teammates and being local juniors, which is fantastic. As you said, Melbourne Storm don't have, like, they do have a Victoria under 18 team that I actually saw play against the Warriors under 18s earlier this year. So they have a very good, like as good as you can, rugby league pathway in Victoria. Like they've got that set up. But as you said, they've had to be creative in how they recruit players, you know, their scouting and stuff like that. What the Storm do is they have a lot of players that debut for the Storm from other clubs. And it's, I don't know, there's no, like, one isn't better than the other. It's good, it's cool, it's fantastic to say, yeah, all these kids came up playing junior footy for the Penrith Panthers. But it's also cool if you're so good at recruiting players and you know exactly who you're looking for, that you can pick out players from other like junior teams and bring them to the Storm to get better to debut. You know, all the Jerome Hughes He's actually a weird one because he debuted for the Gold Coast Titans when he was 18 years old, and then he had a major back injury which set him back. But he was just playing for the Townsville Blackhawks. I think he played like one game for the Cowboys, and Melbourne Storm signed him. Brandon Smith, he was at the Cowboys. Melbourne Storm signed him. Ryan Pappenhausen, Josh Adokar, they were at the Tigers. Melbourne Storm signed them. Like, these aren't players who have specifically made their debuts, but I'm just rolling through them. Dale Finucane, he was at the Bulldogs. Melbourne Storm signed him. Like, all those dudes, the Bromwich brothers, well, I think they've played a combined, like, they've played over 400 games for the Melbourne Storm. Jesse Bromwich and Kenny Bromwich combined. So, one idea is that the Melbourne Storm at every level of recruitment, they are the best. Because they've got those, picking up unwanted juniors elsewhere. They've got that kind of stuff sorted. They've got, Brandon Smith, everyone knew he was amazing at hooker, but it was the Melbourne Storm who were able to sign him. If you're watching First 15 rugby back in 2013, it's impossible to not see how good Vunivalu and Nelson Asafa-Solomona are or were. Every club, Super Rugby, NRL, would have been wanting Vunivalu and Asafa-Solomona. But Melbourne Storm got both of them. Like, that is crazy. I think Asafa-Solomona was on he had been scouted by the Melbourne Storm, earlier in his schooling, and they just have a casual relationship, and then later on in school that relationship turned more serious, and he goes to Melbourne. But I'm thinking like Vunivalu, everyone knows he's an absolute beast playing First 15 rugby for St. Kitts. Every Super Rugby team would love to have him, like he's picked up a really good deal with Queensland Reds, but it's the Melbourne Storm who get those players. So it's all very amazing. But we've talked about this almost every week, but I thought those All Blacks connections were the extra bit of juice that I found really interesting learning about over this weekend. And you did mention City Kickboxing, because I think a lot of these same ideas apply for City Kickboxing. And we've also just had Khabib and Nurmagomedov fighting over in the UAE this past weekend. He retired, undefeated. I think he's 29-0. And if my memory serves me correctly, he has never been cut in the UFC. He has never been knocked down in the UFC. And he won his last 3 fights by a choking submission. This dude is amazing, but he's got a certain there's a similar trait in what he's doing and what the All Blacks and Melbourne Storm and City Kickboxing are doing, because he's got a team, and his father was the coach of the team. His father coached all those Khabib and all his teammates that he's got now. His father was responsible for bringing them up as fighters. And his father passed away this year, and everyone's like, oh my god, Khabib's retiring, is he going to come back? Because the combat sports retirements are always a bit iffy. But no, Khabib's cut from a different cloth. Khabib promised his mum he wouldn't fight without his father again after this fight. And if Khabib says that, Khabib's going to do that. There's no show pony fighter antics that everyone gets used to. But I can see it so clearly, because what Khabib's going to do now is he's just going to take on the role of his father, and Khabib's going to build his team up, and he's going to be the coach of all the other fighters. So it's just he's done what he wants to do, he's done what he needs to do, and now his job is to be a team first man, to put his team ahead of his own personal needs, to put his team first, build up his team. And when you see how Khabib rolls around, there's always a lot of people with him, but those are his brothers. Those are he's sharing that experience with them. He needs them by his side. You watch vlogs and behind the scenes footage, no matter what hotel room Khabib is in, there's going to be like stretchers in that same room because he wants to be sleeping in the same room as his boys. Like, that's just how they operate. And it's like, when you think about it, it makes you wonder what the fuck some sports teams and some athletes and just sports people are doing when you've got a clear blueprint. Like, all you need to do is just pay attention to the ethics, the morals, the ideals, the ethos, the vibe, the culture, the environment that is happening with Melbourne Storm, the All Blacks, Khabib, going back to, what the Miami Heat were doing and what Jurgen Klopp is building at Liverpool and those sorts of things. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to see what works. Yes, other stuff works. Like, you can be a full banger, show pony, not giving a fuck type of person, athlete, team, but the All Blacks have been the best rugby team in the world for a long time for a reason. The Melbourne Storm have won 6 championships, depending on your salary cap situation, in the last 20, 21 years. That happens for a reason. And it's just up to you. If you want to be a winner and you want to consistently win, there are examples to follow. If you're not so worried about winning, all good. For me, it's so clear, and I think it's actually beautiful that those examples are there in the world at this time.
For sure, and it's also when you get to that level, like winning itself and like the nature of what success means. You see with a lot of those folks, like it's different. It's not like win at all costs, like sacrifice my own morals and integrity in order to get a medal or a trophy sort of thing. Because it's not that, the success becomes something more sustainable in a funny way. Like, it's not because as we all know, like when it comes to a World Cup final or a Super Bowl or those kind of one-off events, there's a lot of luck that's involved, and all you can really do is put yourself in the best position, but you can't control if think about how many Super Bowls Tom Brady won, and then think about I think it was two that he lost, I think, both against the New York Giants, but those two in particular, like think about how he lost those, and like there's the helmet catch the first time, the second time there was that it was Mario Manningham, which is a name I haven't thought about for several years. Made like this incredible catch down the sideline. It was like, you can't do anything about that if you're Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just the other team made an incredible play and you end up losing because of it. But like, they got themselves there, and they continued to get themselves there many other times, and they did that by not being like, the reason that was so sustainable is because they had a sort of a foundation of some kind of team culture, same as the Melbourne Storm. Like, I think it's actually, because whenever people talk about the number of championships, and like I've seen Cameron Smith always counts the ones that got taken off for the salary cap stuff, and don't blame him at all either, because if you're a player, you went through all the battles to get there, so you're still going to count it, but you're not going to worry about what was decided in like a judiciary hearing afterwards involving dollar signs and paper and whatever, like stuff that isn't a part of the actual on-field game. But then also obvious reasons why that's counted. But like I think it's actually an underrated factor of, instead of focusing on the controversy of the fact that they had a few of them docked, like the fact that happened and they continued to be such a strong team afterwards and have got them like maintained their status is kind of crazy. Like, I think that's something that's very easy to be slept on. I can't remember what I was going to say before that, but I was going to
I got one.
Actually go for it, because I was going to spin it back. So
one follow up on that. I think this year at some stage, Craig Bellamy showed all the players footage of what happened in the 2 seasons after the big salary cap scandal. So that was used as like a reminder of how the Melbourne Storm operates. So yeah, you went through that situation, but as a club, we kept moving forward. As a club, we did whatever we had to do to maintain our mana. Because you think, like, after that salary cap stuff happened, Melbourne Storm had to buy like a bunch of no-names. They had to put together a team that wasn't really up to like NRL standard, because a lot of those players did literally nothing else after leaving the Melbourne Storm, and they were picked up from nowhere, like reserve grade. Obviously, you got to, like, after that happens, you got a big microscope on how you're managing your salary cap and all that stuff. They have to release Greg Inglis, and it just forced the club into a tougher period. But that's the example, is that, look, after that happened, look at what the club did. We were still competitive. We still maintained our identity, our culture, who we are. And all these blokes, in the 2 years after, all those blokes that came before you, watching this now, they busted their ass to keep the Melbourne Storm moving forward. And that's what you're here for. That's what you're playing for, is that this is the history of the Melbourne Storm. So it's like, you can look at those salary cap situations as negative, or as you said, to me it just further doubles down on their greatness, because that happened, but their greatness is in the fact that they were able to maintain success in the 10 years after it. They've won 3 championships in the 10 years after that happened. That is crazy. And that is the testament to the Melbourne Storm as a club and an organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's kind of what I was trying to talk myself around into with that, like, the redefined success thing, is it becomes less about, like, the trophies just, the things you can't control are going to stop you from winning some grand finals, etc., and they're going to, you're going to cop some rough ones along the way and whatever, but you're always going to be there or thereabouts. And if you're in the contention enough, you're going to win some, you're going to win some trophies. And those things sort of come not as the end goal and the ultimate vindication or whatever of what you're trying to play for. They come as just sort of an inevitable result of, if you can get yourself at the right level, functioning to the right, like doing all those other things that we've just been talking about, the idea of success becomes like, that's the success. The success is being able to sustain your levels and that team culture, and replenishing the playing base and all these things, people playing better with your team than they do with anyone else. Like that, the success basically becomes that process rather than the trophies, which just follow. Like they become a result of like, you're already successful, then you get the trophies. Like, it's not the trophies define whether or not you're good or not, because if that's the case, you might win 1 or 2, you won't win 3 in 10 years. Like, you're not going to be able to do that. I think, am I right? I think Jesse Bromwich is the only one who's been there for all 3 of the Kiwi contingent. Is that right? Like, playing in all 3, well, no, it's 4 or 5 grand finals, because they lost 1 or 2. But those 3 titles since the docking, I think it's Jesse Bromwich.
Yes, because I think Kenny Bromwich debuted in 2013, so I think there was a 2012.
Yeah.
So I think he missed that one. Cameron Smith, Jesse Bromwich, I think, yeah, they're the only ones. And I mentioned Jesse Bromwich in what I wrote today in the Monday Morning Dummy Half. Either footy code is like, to be successful in rugby or rugby league or rugby union, it always starts in the middle. It always starts up the guts. You got to win the forward pack battle before you can do anything else. Like, regardless of whether you got Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, Cameron Munster, Cameron Smith, Brandon Smith, any of those playmakers, like, It's cool to have Vunivalu on one wing and Josh Adokar on the other wing. That's fine. But you need a good forward pack to make sure that you can create the space to put those wingers and those playmakers in beneficial scenarios. Well, who's the dude who's been part of the Melbourne Storm forward pack that whole time? It's Jesse Bromwich. So it's very easy to overlook Jesse Bromwich, and like even this year, his stats, like it's hard, you can't like gain any insight from his stats other than tackle efficiency, but all you need to know is that the Melbourne Storm have won a lot of championships and they've been in a lot of grand finals, and to be a good footy team in either code, you need to have a dominant forward pack. You need to be on the front foot. You need to be getting quick recycling, whether that is in a ruck, whether that's a quick play the ball. The whole point of rugby league or rugby union is you get tackled, you try recycle the ball as quickly as possible, and then you use that time and space that you have manufactured. So that's the recipe for success in either code, and Jesse Bromwich has been in that Melbourne Storm forward pack the whole time. So I don't know if there's like any bigger nod of approval than that. Regardless of what you're doing stats-wise, if you're in that forward pack, if you're in the Melbourne Storm forward pack for over 10 years, regardless of what your stats are, you're obviously doing the job that the Melbourne Storm want you to do, and you just happen to be doing it at a championship level. Right? That's a bit crazy as well.
I looked it up, and shout out to Michael Burgess, ex-New Zealand Herald writer, sports writer there. He actually tweeted it out. He's Jesse Bromwich has won 3 grand finals, which is tied with Jared Waidea-Hargreaves, the only 2 New Zealanders who have won 3. He's the first Kiwis international to play in 5 grand finals. Adam Blair, Brent Todd, Jeremy Smith, and Steve Matai all played in 4. So there you go.
Well, let's stroll into some Plunket Shield here. Wildcard. Shit the bed. We might have to breeze through it. We've done a big old sporting excellence segment there to get us started. That was nice. What did you... I wrote 3 different things about the first round of Plunket Shield cricket, so all my thoughts have been kind of emptied. You always have a slightly different perspective because you're looking at like teams and what team is good and in the context of winning the Plunket Shield, and I try to offer the insights as to like who the players are, what the players are doing, just to build out that cricket landscape. So how did you view that first round of Plunket Shield? What were your highlights? Do you have any questions or just ideas you want to discuss from that first round of Plunket Shield cricket?
Well, there's probably a few discussion points that popped up there. I mean, the overarching idea of that first, like, or theme, should I say, of the first round of the Plunket Shield was just like, it was very first round of the New Zealand domestic summer, eh? Like, the pitches were extremely green. Weather was a big factor in, certainly a decisive factor in one game, although we got results in all of them, but affected all the games to some degree. And as a result, lots of wickets for seam bowlers, not a lot of runs, and a lot of the runs that were scored were kind of scored as sort of a, Michael Rippon's 100, very sort of like, where are we, 100 off 127 balls, a couple sixes involved, 14 fours, very much are like scrapping away, kind of like backs against the wall kind of innings. So I don't know the overall, just because of all that, I don't know we really learnt a whole lot about any of the teams, or like from a competition standpoint. Railway Aces beat the Volts by an innings and 129 runs. Otago getting bowled out for 54 in the second innings was a long way from ideal. I think they've got a couple they need to kind of dominate most weeks, or else they're not going to do a whole lot. Canterbury beat Wellington as well, so that's one. I'm trying to load the bloody scorecard. Like it's, I don't, yeah, there's a lot, like, one of the things when I write my NFL picks, that I have to try keep aware of every year is that when that first round comes along, and everyone's been waiting 9 or 6, 7 months or however long it is. There's a huge off season in the end. Longer this year because there wasn't even like preseason and stuff to pay any attention to and learn from there. So the week 1 judgments are always extremely dangerous. Like you don't want to commit yourself. You obviously like got to be aware of what you've seen. If you're writing about it, you got to discuss whatever talking points come up, but you also don't want to make bold judgments. And I think this just felt like it could be one of those like when the pitches dry up in a couple, hopefully a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, who knows? Like I think there's a possibility that we're looking at a bit of a wonk week and for this first round. So I don't want to make judgments on that side of things, but there's certainly a lot of players to discuss. The opening batting thing is fascinating right now. Like there's a number of there's obviously a couple Black Caps not contingents, what's the word? Incumbents. And when you've seen Tom Blundell, we talked about last week, opening the baton for Wellington, you also had some runs there for Jeet Raval looking pretty good. This is a different Jeet Raval as well, as got to point out, like, Jeet Raval isn't trying to be Mark Richardson 2.0 anymore. He's definitely looking to find a few more runs earlier on in his innings and be a bit more aggressive, and it's been pretty fun to watch, actually, from him. Henry Cooper got a 50 as well. You had big 50s, both of them falling in the 90s, for the 2 CD openers, Greg Hay and George Worker. People still seem to think Devon Conway's an option, even though he's not opening for Wellington, but I mean, he could probably bat wherever. He's bloody good. The only Wellingtonian who scored any like consistent runs in that match as well, in both innings. So that's fascinating. Like there's plenty to talk about there. The guy I would say though that I would most want to chuck out first off, because he was the most impressive player in the first round of the Plunket Shield, and that would be a Mr. Kyle Jamieson, who where are we? 5 for 39 off 12.5 overs in the first innings, and 3 for 6 off 8 overs in the second innings. So, and it's not just the numbers either. Like, you watch his highlights and the way he's swinging the ball, and he was outstanding in that first round, And from a position where he was a little bit of a bolter and then a rapid breakthrough player late in the last season for the Black Caps, and probably, I won't say, it's a bit like those kind of week 1 overreactions, Like, I'm not saying that he was overrated off of the very, very long winter without Black Caps cricket since, but I will say, like, he hadn't played a lot of cricket to get to the point where people were talking about him like he's an automatic selection in the test team or anything like that. But I mean, Jesus, if he bowls like that, he is. Like, that's unstoppable. And he got to this, like, he hasn't always been this kind of player as well. I think he's made such a huge leap over the last probably 2.5 years. It's really impressive, and if I was picking a player of the week for the first round, it would be Kyle Jamieson, and so that's maybe, I don't know if you got anything to add on him, but maybe that's a decent place to start.
Oh, Jamie, he went from underrated to overrated to back to underrated. Is that what you're saying? The weird transition from hottest thing to being...
He might be properly rated now, I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's exactly where he was last summer, so he's exactly where he needs to be, you could say. The old Jamieson, yes. The best thing about, though, as you said, was, he's getting wickets, moving the ball into a right-hander, then into a left-hander, which is the opposite direction. Then he's getting a wicket through his bounce and his height, and that was the thing that stood out to me, was just the skill that he's had on offer. But I don't necessarily think he's hit like a lot of growth as far as like who he is as a bowler, because I remember the first thing that caught my eye about Jamison, like, yeah, it's obvious to say he's really tall, but the first like highlights of him, I saw him bowling for Canterbury, he was moving the ball every way. And that was the first thing was seeing like, oh, there's a real tall guy here bowling, but he's also able to move the ball. And that seems real crucial. And then it's just a natural cycle. Like if you play international cricket and you succeed at international cricket as Jamison did, mate, that's just straight confidence into your veins. You're being injected with confidence straight into your veins, and he would have been rather excited, I think, to get out and play Plunket Shield cricket and perform. The biggest story probably, though, is Tom Blundell opening the batting for Wellington. And we've talked a lot about Blundell over the course of his Black Caps career, especially with the move to open. I'm curious, Wildcard, like what happens if, like, do you see any possibility where the Black Caps opener job could change based on what happens in the Plunket Shield? Because if Tom Blundell is opening for Wellington Firebirds and he doesn't score many runs with that opportunity, like, it's going to be very strange, because I don't want to say you can't select him to open the batting for the Black Caps when you have selected Tom Blundell to open the innings for the Black Caps based on what Tom Blundell does as a middle order batsman for the Firebirds, and more importantly, what he's done around the Black Caps group. But then if he doesn't score runs in the opening position for the Wellington Firebirds when he eventually gets that opportunity, it makes things very murky. And if Tom Blundell struggles and Jeet Raval scores a lot of runs, surely that's a recipe for Jeet Raval to come back in as Black Caps opener. Like, it's such a strange scenario, Wildcard, and somehow we get a lot of strange scenarios with the Black Caps. And it seems like selecting Tom Blundell, best case scenario, Tom Blundell scores a lot of runs for Wellington, and this is like a null and void discussion point. But the Black Caps put him in that position, and I think they've put themselves in an awkward position if, like, it doesn't play out with Tom Blundell scoring a lot of runs. Like, if he struggles, he's struggling in the same role for the first time as his Black Caps role, which is probably going to be more telling and perhaps more detrimental. And especially if that comes with Jeet Raval scoring runs. Like, it's a weird one.
It's an extremely weird one, because as to whether I see, like, the Plunket Shield being a defining factor in selection, not a defining factor, but I mean, if he's not scoring runs and others are, then it does become a question, because all he has to do, because right now he is the incumbent, all he has to do is score some Plunket Shield runs. Like, it's a lot easier said than done, but if he does, say over the next couple, I think the Black Caps play all 4 rounds for the first half of the season before there's any kind of international cricket. So let's say he scores 100 and a couple 50s over the next potentially 6 innings that he's going to get. Well, then he's the Black Caps opener. Like, there's no question at that point. It'll be him and Tom Latham walking out there day 1 of the first test against the West Indies after Kane Williamson wins the toss and decides to bat. Like, that'll be what'll be happening. And if it's not, it's because my guess about the toss will have been wrong, more than Blundell. If he doesn't score runs, though, and he didn't look particularly great against Canterbury, but I will chuck out, like, not easy when it's, like, in these rain-affected games on a very, very grassy wicket to be facing, like, Matt Henry and such. So, there'll be easier opportunities for him to score some runs, as hopefully pitches have a little less bloody green to them, because that was almost hard to distinguish them sometimes in the old pooch can. Like, if he does well, then he's in a good place. But if he doesn't, then it gets weird because it's not really the kind of... I wouldn't say it's consistent with recent Black Cap selections if they drop him purely based on Plunket Shield. But at the same time, I think there were... how many did I list? Like 5 openers who scored 50s this it might have been 4. Latham did, the 2 CDs, the 2 NDs. So at least 5. Don't think anyone scored any runs in the other game. So there you go. Like there's automatically 5 dudes, not to mention Rachim Ravindra, who's opening with him, who's a very highly rated dude. Devin Conway coming in after him, who could potentially be considered. Like, it's not like there's no competition, which is why this is so weird, because I don't really know what to think about it. I think the easiest thing would just be to cheer for Tom Blundell to score a bunch of runs over the next 3 rounds, because then we don't have to worry about how confusing it's going to be.
Oh, but I kind of want to see Jeet get another crack, you know?
I do too, if he's going to bat like this, because he's definitely, like, you remember when he first got dropped and he sort of came out and said something weird in the media about how he wants to play at the next World Cup, and then people sort of laughed at it because this is the dude who bats really slowly for the test team and just got dropped from the opening spot, but he actually came out and scored some Ford Trophy runs, like, and scored them at a clip too. Like he was finding boundaries and he was turning strike over and just being more aggressive. He's like, without a doubt, Jeet Raval being dropped from the test team has sparked his career. Whether he gets another chance to play for the Black Caps or not, he's definitely got a bit of a new lease on life. He's more aggressive. He's more determined. Like, he is actually quite a fun player to watch at the moment. Like he's changed teams as well, hasn't he? He's gone from Auckland to Northern Districts, which is another big change. What's that saying? Like change your environment, change your life, or change something. There's something like that. Taking control of your situation and all that. Like again, I don't know if it's going to lead to more Black Caps cricket or not, but he's one of the most enjoyable players to follow at the moment.
All right, here's a question. So if we're first answer 4 games, if Rachim Ravindra, Tom Blundell, Jeet Raval, and Henry Cooper open for all those 4 games, who do you think will score more runs combined? Jeet Raval and Henry Cooper, or Rachim Ravindra and Tom Blundell? Because right now, Raval and Henry Cooper hit 50s, big up to them, so they've got the lead at the moment. Whereas old Blundell, he scored 19 runs in that first game, and I can't find Ravindra. He scored 28 runs in that first game. So, something to keep an eye on. Would you hazard a guess right now as to who's going to finish with the most combined runs out of those 2 opening partnerships?
Well, yeah, I'm going to pick the ones that are already in the lead and say Cooper and Raval are looking pretty sharp in first game. So would be surprised. Be very surprised if they weren't the leading pair, but I'd also suggest that Hay and Worker will probably beat them both.
And they'll be even stranger. The 2, that if that happens, that will present...
Because neither of them seem to be in any contention for Black Caps, eh?
Not at all. And Greg Hay, he has scored a 50 in each of his last 5-6 innings of Plunket Shield cricket. He is averaging 43.55.
Which is amazing.
Which is very handy. He averages over 40 in first class and list A cricket, and he's never played for New Zealand. So big up to him. Well, we have to stretch it out then. So George Worker, Greg Hay, that's one opening combination. Jeet Raval, Henry Cooper, that's another opening combination. Then we have Tom Blundell and Rachim Ravindra. That is something that we will keep tabs on over the course of the season. A couple more notes here, Wildcard. The 2 leading spinners, Brad Shamulian, Underground King status, Brad Shamulian. I've got him as the Underground King. and Rachin Ravindra. So that is a continuation of last year where the best spinners were predominantly batsmen who bowl, part-timers. Brad Chameleon was playing as a frontline spinner because Ajaz Patel didn't play for the Stags, so he's not really in that part-timer role, but he's traditionally a batsman who bowls a bit. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Where are these specialist spinners at? And also, wildcard, another little interesting matchup here. Daryl Mitchell versus Sean Solier. So Sean Solier took 5 wickets in the space of 8.4 overs, which was a bit crazy. Daryl Mitchell took 6 wickets in 26 overs of the Canterbury-Wellington game. Obviously, Daryl Mitchell, he's a black cap. He's better than Sean Solier just based off like standard cricket logic. But Sean Solier opened the batting for Auckland and he dismantled Otago with the ball in that final innings. So, same kind of theory here, Wildcard. What do you like? Do you think like they're both all-rounders? Daryl Mitchell will bat in the middle order for Canterbury. He'll operate as a 4th or 5th seamer, and he bowled 26 overs in that first up game, so he'll get plenty of overs. Sean Solier is an opening batsman who is going to be called on to bowl as well. Do you think Daryl Mitchell is going to, do you think this is going to play out like this matchup, this little fantasy matchup that I've created? Do you think this is going to play out as per one would, like the cricket landscape suggests, where Daryl Mitchell is going to wipe the floor with Sean Solier? Or do you think there is room for Sean Solier to be more impactful as an all-rounder for the Aces than Daryl Mitchell?
It's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of the two of them head-to-head before. I don't know. Solier's really been given this kind of funky little role, eh? Like, he had started last year, and he's always been a little bit of a bowler, but he started last year, I think, and taken a few more wickets, and then suddenly, I mean, he got, what were his figures in that thing? Like 5 for 6 or something crazy? 5 for 8 from 5.4 overs. He did bowl right at the end, so he got like, 3 of those wickets were the last 3 of the last 4 guys in the, although that includes Michael Rippon, who scored 100 in the first innings. So, and he did get top scorer Anu Kitchen out at LBW. So, he got a lot of late wickets at the point where the game was, Auckland were going to win it one way or another. It was just a matter of how long Otago hung on. And when they get bowled out for 54, they obviously didn't hold on very long. But also, you can't dismiss that as just a bit of convenience when also he has been used more and more effectively as a little sort of a little bit of a Nathan Astley kind of medium pacer, right? Like a proper old medium pacer like you don't see too much anymore these days. And that's a cool little role when you couple that with this week. Has he opened the batting before? Is this a completely new thing? Or was he just I don't know, because Guptill was batting at 5 as well, eh? I was a little bit confused when I saw the Auckland lineup, although Guptill also batted excellently at 5 and scored 60 odd, and then Ben Horn went ballistic, didn't he? 162. So it was, I don't know, is that normal or expected or whatever? Because it sort of caught me out of the blues. Sean Solier as an opener suddenly. He scored 17 off 123 deliveries, so he's definitely trying to be the new Jeet Raval now that Jeet Raval is a different Jeet Raval. A lot of that was batting to see out the end of the day in fading light, so he, it's a little bit distracting from the thing, and then he got out cheap the next morning, I think. So, but I didn't even see him as I don't know. I was just surprised when he was opening the batting, but he's in a nice little role. I don't know how that'll compare with Daryl Mitchell. I still expect Daryl Mitchell, just the player he is, will probably take more wickets for sure, probably score more runs, but Yeah, confused about Sean Solier as an opener, but only because I didn't see it coming. Is that something that's been sort of touted in the past, or what? Has he done that role before?
It was surprising to see. However, Sean Solier, I think he has batted either opening or number 3 in Ford Trophy before. So there is some sort of history of him batting up the order. You're a bit rough there. He's definitely no Nathan Astor, I'll say that. He's a certified...
Nathan Astor was a fantastic bowler, now you're being rough.
No. He's a fantastic bowler, but if we're talking about what they did as bowlers, Sean Solier is a bit more... he's a couple levels, not levels, but his style of bowling is more Tim Southey, Doug Bracewell than, whereas Nathan Astor's style of bowling is more Chris Harris, Jesse Ryder. Like Sean Solier is skewing, he's skewing more to a...
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
Because he did kind of just get picked as a seamer last season. That's the strange thing. He was batting down the order and he was being used as a straight up seam bowler. That made the whole opening the batting thing a bit weird. Is because he was batting down the order, focus on bowling last season. This season, it seems to be focus on bowling and open the batting, which is exciting for him. I think to sum up the Daryl Mitchell, Sean Solier thing, like Daryl Mitchell has the hierarchy in the cricket landscape, but I would say that there is that space between, so the Daryl Mitchell is levels above Sean Solier in the cricket landscape, and that differentiation is, I don't know how to word it, but Sean Solier has a lot of scope to impact games for Auckland if he is opening the batting and he's bowling overs, right? So, they're completely different levels of Kiwi cricket, but I think Sean Solier can make up for that with the greater opportunities he's going to get for Auckland, if you catch my drift there.
I do catch your drift there. I also think Daryl Mitchell is going to have a very strong season, though, so, it's like, just looking through some of these scoreboards, there's a lot of, sort of batsmen who can bowl a little, in particular guys who can like roll the arm over with a little bit of part-time spin, because we've seen how successful that's been last season in particular. And there's a lot of like bowlers who are quite good at swinging the bat when they come in at 7 or 8 or 9. There's not as many like traditional all-round, like the Black Caps don't really have one. Maybe Colin de Gronholm is the closest. But certainly, like, no one in the Plunket Shield is on a level with Ben Stokes, but, like, that model of player who could make the team as a batsman, could make the team as a bowler. Stokes is a better batsman than bowler, but he's still a very good bowler. I don't expect anyone bowling 140 Ks and scoring hundreds at 5, in the Plunket Shield, but it'd be nice to see a little bit of an all-rounder resurgence, you know what I mean? Like a proper all-rounder, resurgence, of something that we used to have too many of them to be able to fit in a Black Caps team, and now it's just a little bit more of a drought. I don't know. It feels like maybe we're like this is how these things happen, eh? They happen in trends. You're up and then you're down. There's none, so they come through. Like batsmen dominate the game for a while, bowlers dominate the game for a while. Maybe we're due a little all-rounder resurgence.
Well, it's happening because Kyle Jamieson leads all wicket takers, and he scored 2 40s in Test cricket. So he scored runs in Test cricket as the current best bowler in the Plunket Shield. Daryl Mitchell is second for wickets in the Plunket Shield this season after one game. He scored a 50 on Test debut. Sean Solier is third, and he's opening the batting for Auckland. So the 3 leading bowlers, 2 of them have scored runs for the Black Caps Test team, and one of them's opening the batting. It's 2020 wildcard, and Shit's weird. Shit is weird. What are things as weird on your
That's what we want to see, though. That's what we want to see.
are things that weird on your footballing desk at the moment? We've got local Premiership footy coming up. What's on your agenda at the moment?
Well, the Women's Premiership starts this weekend, like this upcoming weekend, and it's currently Tuesday afternoon, and I'm seeing 2 out of 7 squad lists been released to the public. So obviously all the squads are known and are in training within the actual tells. But it would be a little bit if we could get some like publicity, so I have something to be able to write about. But see how that goes. The Wellington Phoenix reserves have named their squad, but they're the only men's premiership. They got a couple more weeks before they start. I think I think it's mid-November. So nothing I can really say on those fronts. Like I'm still, without more like details to go on. However, in the absence of, it's also as well a quiet week for the Flying Kiwis because it's an international week for the ladies, and the fellas it's just a little bit of a weird week where like only one of the guys in the MLS played and etc. Just not a lot of goals and exciting happenings there as much as usual. And also not a lot of media work going on with the Wellington Phoenix, who I think are the only team in the A-League, I'm pretty sure, who haven't been like tweeting up about new signings and starter pre-seasons and things like that. So obviously their situation is very difficult with logistical reasons, but it would be nice to hear some things. However, thankfully a few of the our media colleagues from the more mainstream avenues have at least been able to tell us that the Wellington Phoenix have supposedly signed Clayton Lewis as one, James McGarry is another, and a fella called Joshua Laws, who's a Scottish-born Australian youth international, I think a current under-23 player. So very much in the like Cameron Devlin kind of mold. Sounds like of the guys who were left who hadn't been re-signed, sounds like Tiarafai Hudson-Wihongi will be re-signed, which is lovely because he would then be the only centre-back on the roster if that's the case once that's done, and there's absolutely no reason not to sign him up to how well he played at the end of last season. That news was broken not by one of journalistic colleagues, but by a certain Winton Roofer who tweeted about it after doing some like skills camp or something with Tiarafai, so I don't know what's up there, but that should be done. So there's 4 more players you can chuck on the Phoenix's thing, but of the players who weren't re-signed, haven't heard about Luke De Vere yet. I'd have to have a little Twitter search and see if I can find some whisperings, but it does sound like Walter Scott and Liam McGing are both looking elsewhere at trialing at different clubs, which, I mean, they were depth players, young Australian players, so it's not unexpected, especially under all the circumstances. Back to the guys they've signed though, James McGarry, former Phoenix dude who, I think he has played for the All Whites once or twice. He'd be in his early 20s, 21, 22, 23 sort of range. Left back, so an immediate Liberato Kakache. He was previously, after he left the Phoenix, he went and played for Willemsvee in Netherlands in the Eredivisie, where he did play a few games for them. Not a huge amount, like he spent most of his time on the bench there for the first team, training in a professional environment, getting better, but not getting a huge amount of games. And then eventually his, by the way, that's where he was teammates with Michael Veld, who was also at the same team, currently out on loan in a second tier club where he's playing every week, getting senior football, doing the business. I think he's had about 4 clean sheets in 9 games or something like that. Check Flying Kiwis for the actual stat there. So James McGarry is like, he lost out on his, they sort of negotiated these in when it became likely he wasn't going to be re-signed and lockdowns were happening, so he left a few months early. Has been back in New Zealand since then, so like a pretty obvious. He's even been on record saying he would happily come back to the Phoenix, even though he was a bit disappointed the last time he was there that he because he was one of the best dudes for the Premiership squad while he was there, but not getting any opportunities for the senior team. He no bad blood there. He was excited and hopeful to get an opportunity again, and now he's going to get that, so that's cool. That's a good signing. It's filling a necessary hole in the squad. Clayton Lewis, been one of the better players domestically. He was one of the better players domestically. Then he went and played for Scunthorpe, had a years over there where things got a little bit weird. Wasn't necessarily in the best situation once they started churning through managers, and had a couple spells where he got decent games there, but mostly on the outside looking in. Came back, played very well for Auckland City last year, and now supposedly getting to go with the Wellington Phoenix. So that's another cool one. Probably a replacement for Callum McLeod in his own way. Like, very different kinds of players, but probably about that kind of type. He might be able to cover some central midfield as well. Josh Laws is a central midfielder who'll be the new Brandon Wilson, sort of like midfielder who can chip back, or maybe even centre back at a stretch. So, I mean, I like all of the signings. They're all very good. They're all very much in keeping with what Ufi Talai has been doing since he came in. So, it's just, yeah, the trick for them is just going to be, like, there's a couple very obvious holes in that squad. Centre back is one, probably want another striker as well. So, like, what they do with their import spots, what caliber of player they're able to get with the money that they're going to be able to spend, that's going to be pretty crucial in terms of what the Phoenix are able to offer next season. But, good signs. Those are good domestic transfers, things that bode pretty well. And then, of course, the biggest news of the last week was the little leak that the club owners in the A-League have voted in favour of the Wellington Phoenix getting a W-League team this upcoming season as well, which doesn't give them a lot of time to prepare. Like, it's both A-League and W-League start, I think, the day after Boxing Day. So we're talking exactly 2 months from today. The Women's Premiership is about to start, and those clubs can't be too happy if suddenly the Phoenix are going to come in and be like, I know you're starting like right now, but we need your players because we've got this thing going on. Whether players play out that season, because there'll be 2 weeks in between, or only 1 week if you make the final, but only 2 teams make the final. So, like, do players play half a season and then go do Phoenix stuff? Do players play a full season and then sign with the Phoenix on short notice without really getting any preparation for a very new squad? Like, when will we hear details on coaching? And also, will this actually officially happen? It sounds like it's more likely than not, but there's still always the chance that the financials will get in the way, or just the logistics. They'll definitely have to be based in Australia, but will they be able to bring over a largely New Zealand squad, or will they sort of have to do what the Warriors women's team did this year, where you've got a few of the returning Kiwi players, but then having to prop it up with a lot of locally based Australian players? Like, there's a lot of question to go under the bridge as far as what happens here, but I didn't think there was much of a chance of this happening a month ago to get a W League team in this upcoming season. So either way, extremely exciting news.
Yeah, there are only 5 Warriors players in that Warriors team, which made it just strange, because you're like, there's very little about the Warriors that like is representative of the Warriors in that team. So it will be interesting to see how things play out for the Wellington Phoenix women. Is there enough in New Zealand for a Wellington Phoenix football women's team to be built? Like, without, because you're not going to bring a lot of the international women back to New Zealand. Like, you're not going to be able to lure them back from United States or Europe. So,
no, and you wouldn't want to either. Like, you want to be building up a player base rather than just bringing down the ones that are already in that sort of professional level. Like, expand the professional ranks rather than contracting them.
Yeah, for sure. So you would, like, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, because as you said, it's all a bit iffy, but you would imagine that the whole point is to build that out with local based women, like the best players from the National League to go into a Wellington Phoenix setup, and because you got to pick players who can step up. So you got to pick the best players from within Aotearoa, but maybe build it out like what's happening with the men's team, where there's a lot of local Aotearoa juniors, and it is a bit of a stepping stone, but you recruit players from elsewhere to fill your needs and build around the more local presence.
Yeah, a lot will depend on, in terms of international players, that's tricky, but the W League does have a existing link with the NWSL in America, so it is possible just because of the timings of the seasons, like the W League happens during the off season of the American League. So it's not out of the question that, I mean, I wouldn't expect someone like, Abby Erceg, for example, but maybe because she hasn't played as much. She's normally coming off a long season and a full off season, having played almost every minute. So generally she takes a well-earned rest during the summer. But because it was a shortened season, I think maybe someone like Rosie White might be a possibility, like on loan for the Wellington Phoenix season, and then back to Seattle for the next NWSL in like March or April or whenever that'll be starting. It's possible. If that happens, like you often see like a few players from the same team will go in a little group to one of the clubs. So maybe if they can like wrangle something there with one of those NWSL teams and get like 3 or 4 American players over to help prop things out, that would work. Ideally, yeah, what you do want is a team that is predominantly, not necessarily exclusively, but predominantly New Zealand based, because New Zealand football, I think, is going, and Sport New Zealand as well, are both going to be putting a bit of money into making this happen, and therefore they're only doing that if it's to provide a pathway for Kiwi players to bridge that gap between playing domestically in New Zealand at an amateur level, where you're still having to work during during the whole week and then play games on Saturdays, to bridge that gap to then professional teams in Europe or in America, that's a huge step. And the weirdness with the football ferns is that often what you'd expect would be for players to work their way up, to turn professional, to make a name for themselves with a professional club somewhere overseas, and then get picked for the national team out of that. It's sort of what we're seeing now with the All Whites, who can now pick a fully professional team, which is only something that's really been possible for the last years. With the football ferns, it's sort of been the other way around. You work your way up domestically, and then you get picked for the national team, and then you do well for the national team, and players will sign you after the World Cup when they've seen you play a couple games. Then they'll sign you professionally. We kind of want to flip that last step around, so that the national team is the pinnacle, and therefore you're going to have a stronger national team. You're going to have more players to be able to pick from, more competition, etc., etc., etc. So getting the Wellington Phoenix W League team would be a big part of that. Just to bridge that gap. I think there are enough players around, because there are a lot of players who, for lifestyle reasons or just unluckiness, just don't get the opportunity to play professionally or chose not to. Or for example, Anna Green's been over there, has come back and is playing for Capital. Emma Ralston played professionally in Germany for a little while, has played a little bit of W League in the past. She is, I think, in the FFDP at the moment, the development program that New Zealand Football run. Annalie Longo played for Melbourne Victory last year. She has been the best domestic player for in this competition for the last 4 or 5 years, and she should be pretty much the first name on the list. If she isn't going back to Melbourne Victory, then I think they're calling them the She-Nicks, which I love. You got the Wee-Nicks and the She-Nicks, and I guess the He-Nicks as well. The triumvirate. So there's players. There's definitely players available. Whether it's enough to fill out an entire squad is where it gets tricky. But I will also say this is an ideal time to be stepping into, which is in a little bit of a transition, because you have had a lot of the very best players, like the Australian internationals, the ones that people go to watch. They've 7 or 8 of them have all gone and signed in England in particular, and you'd have to say that Rebecca Stott moving to England is also part of that same wave of top Australian W League players moving to the WSL in England. So the overall standard of the league, to be honest, is going to be a little bit weaker coming up this season, and it's going to be just a little bit of an identity crisis as well, because the Aussie internationals, like I say, are the ones who bring the crowds in, and there will be crowds to some degree. I don't know what that will be getting. Well, we might get packs. I don't know. You can't predict anything 2 months away. Everything changes on a dime at the moment in 2020, but it is a little bit of a convenient time as well. It's like the Wellington Phoenix will get a little bit of room to have a transitional first year, so it's doable.
Aussies do love their women's sport, so as long as there's fans allowed, there'll probably be rather impressive crowd numbers, because
they get bigger crowds to Matilda's games than they do to Socceroos games. It's basically them and America are the only two countries that can say that.
Yeah, and the reason I said it is because I just watched the White Ferns versus Australia series, and those games had as big a crowds as you could have. And Australia loves their women's cricket teams, and they just seem to really get behind women's sport on a completely different level, which, like, you've got two ways of reflecting it. You've got all the different leagues that are happening. You've got football, A-League, NRL, AFL, cricket. So you've got all those leagues happening, but then you've got, like, fans showing up to watch those things as well. So you've got, like, the good, obviously, it's a chicken and the egg. You can't have one without the other, but at both levels, top end level of establishing competitions, professional competitions, and a grassroots level of fans showing up to watch women's sport at that level, both of them are taken care of. So that's pretty cool for Australia. Anything else, Wildcard, or we'll wrap it up there?
I'll just add on to your last point that I think also women's sport is so well, I say women's sport like it's just a singular thing. I'll be more specific and actually use a real example, but say like that White Ferns and Australia series, like so well broadcast, so well packaged, so well marketed, and I think Australia is kind of leading the way when you look at like the NRLW stuff, the AFLW stuff, the WBBL, like it's a part of, like, that's the link between the fans and the players as well. Like you mentioned how the leagues are doing, how the fans are, like, both sides of that thing are going. The connecting point is like the media aspect and the marketing aspect, which are also extremely good, which makes the W League, like, it's why it just felt like such an essential thing to get a Wellington Phoenix team in there, because that's exactly the kind of scene you want to latch onto, eh?
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's my point of reference for what is happening in New Zealand. Because you look over at a, like, again, just referring back to the cricket, you look at the difference in how women's cricket is packaged in New Zealand. It is packaged solely alongside men's cricket. Where you look over what's happening in Australia, everything is being built separate to the men's cricket team. And they are building their own competitions that stand alone as competitions and, create revenue, get sponsorships. All that stuff is happening just from the women's teams and the women's competitions. It's not like, because the men's team is sponsored by this company, the women's team is sponsored by that company as well. We've got a Super Smash competition, so we're just going to put the women's Super Smash alongside it. No, what Australia does is give their women's athletes, their female athletes, the platform and the marketing and the backing and the opportunity that they deserve. Otherwise, we will wrap it up there. And we will stay tuned for another episode next week. Do check out the Premier League chat that we had for the Patrons. And there'll be plenty more writing coming up on the website as well. So thank you very much for listening. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Choo-choo-choo.